Before we get into the process of importing our multi-layered PSD file into After Effects, I want to just spend some time explaining what happens when we are importing an asset into After Effects. So in order to show that, for now, I'm going to just import a single JPEG file by dragging it and dropping it into my project. So behind the scene, what is happening is that After Effects is making a link between this After Effects project file, this one, to a file named Lily version 15 that is sitting inside this folder. The point here is that we never have the final version. So it means that we might need to go back and continue working on the design. And of course, we do not save over it. So we save as a new version, version 16, for example. But we've already imported version 15 into After Effects. If the file name is changed to something else, or if I grab this file and drop it into another folder for some reason, after I have imported that into After Effects, it causes After Effects to lose that file. It means that it no longer can see that file inside this folder that originally was supposed to be. So it says the file path is here, and the file name is something like this, and it's looking for that file sitting in the exact folder. Just to prove that, I'm going to rename this file to something else. For example, this is going to become my version 16 of this design. And now if I go back to After Effects, you can see that this will throw an error that says I cannot find a file name version 15 sitting in this folder. So in order to avoid this, we need to make sure that anything that we want to bring into After Effects is sitting in a folder that it's supposed to be sitting at. Of course, we can always change the folder that After Effects is looking for, but in order to avoid this hassle, we need to do some organizational works before we import our assets into After Effects. So what I tend to do usually is for my projects in After Effects, of course, I make a folder called my project folder. It can be anything. And inside of that, I might need to have Photoshop folders or Photoshop assets. I might need to have music. So I will make folders for each one of those different types of assets. I make a folder for my After Effects files. And inside each one of these folders, I might have multiple characters, multiple backgrounds, anything. I make a folder for each one of them. That's one thing. The other one that is even more important is to make sure that the file that we are importing into After Effects is not containing any kind of letters that is going to be changed over time. For example, in this case, my file name might contain the version number. So all the time, rather than importing my versions into those applications, I master my file, meaning that I make a copy of this and change the name of it to something that is unique. And then I import that unique file into After Effects. I'm going to delete this one in order to avoid any confusion. So in this case, rather than importing version 15, I duplicate it, Control-C, Control-V, and remove any version number or anything from that. This process is called mastering. This file has a unique name that doesn't contain any version numbers. However, it's a copy of my latest version. So if I drag it and drop it here, and I'm intentionally importing my files currently using this method by dragging the files, but eventually we are going to avoid this. So I import that here. I'm going to ignore all of those options. I will talk about those. And now I know that this file is coming from this folder. It's my latest version. However, if I want to go back in Photoshop and continue working on this and name it version 16, then I'm going to duplicate that file. So let's just do it. Maybe on the face. I'm going to draw something like that. And I'm going to version it up. Save as a new version, version 16. This is now my new latest version with an update on the face of the character. I can simply delete this file, copy and paste this, and name this again Lily. So if I now go back to After Effects, just gave it some time to update, and now you can see that I didn't lose anything and the face is now updated. So the whole point here is that we keep versioning up our progress and we are sure that the file that we import into After Effects is always having a unique name and it's always a copy of our latest version. So I wanted to spend some time explaining this. I'm going to go back here and close this file to go back to our original state. I'm going to remove all of these. This was our latest version, so I'm going to make a copy of it and name it Lily, and I'm going to import Lily into After Effects. So inside of After Effects, in order to bring in some assets, when I was showing in the previous lesson, I just dragged the file and dropped them here. We tend to avoid that because sometimes After Effects offers some options depending on the file types that we are trying to import into the application. And if we just drag the files into After Effects, we might actually skip those options. So rather than importing the files using this method, we usually go to the File, Import File, or the shortcut for it is you can actually double click on the project window, select the file that you want to import and import it into After Effects. The first thing that I want to talk about is making sure that your sequence checkbox is turned off. Import as doesn't matter here because eventually it's going to open up another window and that window is going to override whatever we choose here. Selecting the master file, import. After Effects is smart enough to understand that this is a PSD multi-layered file, so it allows us to import it as a footage, meaning that it will treat it as a single file with no layers associated with that, or it will let us to retain all of the layers. I want to make sure that you understand what's the difference between composition and composition retain layer size. So I'm going to intentionally choose the wrong option here, composition, and I'm going to hit OK. It will import the file as a composition. So if I double click on this composition, you can see that all of the layers are here. However, if I just focus on one of these layers here, for example, the left leg, you can see that although the drawing is just as small as the legs, the bounding box of this drawing is to the size of my composition. So if I start rotating this, you can see that this bounding box is not respecting the layer size. If I go back to Photoshop, what I expect to see is the bounding box of each one of my layers to be exactly as big as my drawing. So I'm going to import the file one more time, this time making sure that I choose composition retain layer size. You can see that each one of these layers are having their own dedicated bounding box, making it much easier to manage our layers inside of After Effects. Let's just understand what happens when we import a PSD file into After Effects. You can see that it will bring it as a composition. It will also bring all the layers inside a folder. And if you notice here, all of the folders that we had inside of Photoshop, they come as compositions as well. So you can see that, for example, left hand came as a composition. This composition contains multiple layers in it. However, at the end, they will become one layer and they will be sitting in the main composition that we have here. Let's just rename this. I can right click on this and rename this, or I can hit enter. The other thing that is worth mentioning here is that the composition comes with some settings, including the resolution as well as the frame rate and the length of the composition. The resolution actually comes from the resolution of the file. So whatever resolution we choose for the file dictates the resolution of our composition. However, the other two properties that come with this composition, which is the frame rate as well as the length of this composition, comes from a previously created composition that we might have created in After Effects before importing this file. I can change all of these by going to the composition setting. Control K is the shortcut, and we can change those. So for example, I can change this to 300. Changing all of these properties after we import this file into After Effects comes with some issues. One is you can see that all of your layers are having the old length of 200 frames. I can extend them. I can bring my time slider all the way to the frame 300 and extend these. However, I can only extend the layers and not the compositions. For the compositions, I need to go one by one, get into each one of the compositions by double clicking on them and changing the properties of each one of these compositions to match to my main composition outside there. So now this composition is allowed to be extended. So in order to avoid all of these, what I do is that usually I create a composition to the properties that I want. The resolution is not that important. However, the frame rate is supposed to be what I want, the duration that I want, for example, 400 frames, and create it. I'm going to import my file one more time. Composition written layer size and hit OK. So now if I double click on that composition, you can see that the length is set to 400. And also if I go to the properties, the frame rate is 24 and the resolution is coming from the file itself. If I double click on each one of these compositions, now each one of these comps are also having a length of 400. I'm going to do some changes in my workspace. I'm going to drag my timeline and drop it to become the side panel of my workspace. I want to have my project to be also here. I want to keep the timeline. And eventually I'm going to work with some of the effects that my plugins will create for me. So I'm going to open a window, effects controls, and I'm going to undock it and make sure that I have easy access to the effects panel as well. I do not need to see any other panels here. I can actually right click on them and close any panels that I don't want to see. We are going to use a lot of puppet pins here in this character. So we are going to use the free DUIK Angela, and it used to be called DUIK Basil. So here's their website. You can just Google DUIK Angela and you can follow the instructions to download this free plugin. Feel free to also read through the process of how you can donate to them as well. So after you download that, you get a zip file. You just need to extract it. You will get all the scripts that you need to actually copy into the After Effects folder. The process is very easy. You just need to find where you have installed After Effects, and you can just copy these scripts, paste them in the After Effects scripts folder. I also need to copy all of these script UIs in the script UI folder. And in order to load them in After Effects, you need to close After Effects and open it again. So I'm going to save my file and I'm going to close After Effects and open up After Effects again. Now if I go to the window, I can see that all of the DUIK tools are going to be visible in my Windows panel. So DUIK Angela is the main panel that gives us access to each one of these panels individually as well. So what we need to load up is DUIK Angela, and if I open it up, choose the language that you want, and the panels are going to be loaded up. So for now, let's just keep it somewhere. You can even dock it anywhere that you want, and we can start placing the pins and using this tool to control the pins. All right, let's just start rigging this character.